I was cutting carrots when my sister-in-law told me I wasn't invited to Christmas dinner. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't hesitate. She said it the same way someone says they're out of milk. Casual, decided, final. "Oh, and just so you know," she added, leaning against my kitchen counter like she owned the place, "Mom thinks it's better if you don't come this year. It'll keep the peace." The knife slipped, not enough to cut me, but enough to make my heart jump. I stared at the orange slices on the cutting board and waited for the sting. It didn't come right away. It never does. Betrayal usually arrives quietly, then grows teeth later. "Keep the peace," I repeated. She smiled tight and rehearsed. "You understand, right?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. My throat felt like it had closed on purpose. This was my house. I had married into their family 6 years ago, moved states, left my job, put my career on pause while my husband Andrew built his. I hosted holidays here. I remembered birthdays. I bought thoughtful gifts for people who never once asked how I was doing. And now I was being uninvited from Christmas like an inconvenience. I was 31 years old, standing in my own kitchen being told I no longer belonged. When my sister-in-law, Bethany, finally left the house, felt too quiet. I turned off the stove and sat at the table, hands folded, staring at nothing. I told myself there must be a misunderstanding. There always is, right? I called Andrew. He didn't answer. I texted him. He replied 20 minutes later. "We'll talk tonight. Please don't make this harder than it has to be." That sentence did something to me. It wasn't the words. It was the familiarity. The way I had heard them before, just phrased differently. When his mother forgot my birthday. When his parents changed their will without telling us. When I was quietly excluded from family business meetings I had once been encouraged to attend. Don't make this harder. Translation: accept it quietly. I didn't. Andrew came home after dark. He didn't kiss me hello. He set his briefcase down slowly like someone entering a negotiation. "Bethany shouldn't have said it like that," he began. "Like what I asked. Like the truth." He sighed. "It's not personal." That was the moment I knew. When someone says something isn't personal, it always is. "She said your mother thinks I shouldn't come to Christmas," I said. "Is that true?" He looked at the floor. I felt something shift inside me, something structural. "She thinks it's better," he said carefully, "if it's just immediate family this year." "And I'm not immediate family?" My voice sounded calm, too calm. "You are," he said quickly, "just not by blood." There it was. The sentence that would replay in my head for months. Not by blood. I stood up. "So let me understand this," I said. "Your parents are hosting Christmas dinner at the house we helped renovate, with money from our joint account, and I'm not welcome." Andrew rubbed his face. "Mom's under a lot of stress. The inheritance paperwork is complicated. She doesn't want tension." Inheritance. That word landed heavier than anything else he'd said. I thought about the family business, the conversations I'd been excluded from, the sudden meetings that happened when I wasn't home. The way Andrew's mother Lorraine had started calling him more often, pulling him away quietly. "Is this about the will?" I asked. Andrew didn't answer. I laughed, once, sharp. "So I'm being benched for Christmas because your mother is dividing up her assets and I make her uncomfortable. That's not fair," he snapped. "What's not fair," I said, "is pretending this came out of nowhere." He finally looked at me then, and in his eyes I saw something worse than guilt. Relief. Relief that the decision had already been made, that he didn't have to choose, that someone else had done it for him. "Just for this year," he said, "after things settle." I walked past him and went upstairs. I closed the bedroom door quietly. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at my hands. They were steady. That scared me more than if they had been shaking. Because I realized something important. This wasn't about Christmas. This was about erasure. They were removing me slowly, politely, one exclusion at a time. Training me to accept less, to stop asking questions, to make myself smaller so their version of family stayed intact. And Andrew was letting it happen. I didn't cry that night. I lay awake listening to him breathe beside me, and I thought about all the moments I had ignored, all the comments I had brushed off, all the times I had told myself I was being sensitive. I wasn't sensitive. I was observant. And now I was done being quiet. What they didn't know yet was this. I had read the family documents. I knew things. And if they thought excluding me from Christmas would keep the peace, they were wrong. It was the moment the war began. The first thing I did the morning after I was uninvited from Christmas was open the filing cabinet Andrew thought I never touched. It sat in the hallway closet behind winter coats and a vacuum that hadn't worked in years. Andrew always said it was just boring paperwork. I had believed him because believing him was easier than wondering why he locked it. The key was still where it always was, taped behind the light switch inside his home office. He had never bothered to change that because he had never believed I would look. That realization stung more than the exclusion itself. I sat on the floor with the cabinet drawer open and started reading. Corporate records for Whitaker Holdings. Trust documents. Amendments. Side letters. Emails printed and filed out of order. Notes in Lorraine's sharp, looping handwriting clipped to formal documents like afterthoughts. I read slowly, carefully, the way you read something that might change your life. By the time I finished, my coffee was cold and my hands were no longer steady. The Whitaker family business wasn't just Andrew's inheritance. It was mine too, not by blood, by contract. 6 years earlier, when Andrew and I married, Lorraine had insisted we sign a post-nuptial agreement. She framed it as protection. For everyone. It keeps things clean, she'd said, smiling like a woman who never raised her voice but always got her way. Especially when there's a family business involved. I had been 25, in love, new to the city, grateful to be included at all. I signed. What I hadn't understood then but understood now was that the agreement cut both ways. Yes, it limited my claim if the marriage failed, but it also guaranteed something Lorraine seemed to have forgotten: transparency. Any material change to the trust or distribution of assets required disclosure to spouses with a financial stake. And I had a financial stake. I flipped to the most recent amendment, dated 3 months ago. My name was missing. Not crossed out, omitted. They hadn't removed me. They had pretended I was never there. That afternoon, Andrew came home early. Too early. He stood in the doorway of the living room watching me like he expected to find something broken. "You didn't answer my texts," he said. "I was busy," I replied. "With what?" I gestured to the papers spread across the coffee table. His face drained of color. "You went through my files." "Our files," I corrected. He closed the door slowly behind him. "You shouldn't have done that." "Funny," I said. "Your mother shouldn't have altered a trust without notifying a legal stakeholder either." His jaw tightened. "You don't understand how these things work." "I understand exactly how they work," I said. "That's why I know she violated the agreement." "She didn't violate anything," he snapped. "She's protecting the family." "And I'm not family," I said quietly. He looked away. There it was again. The silence. The refusal to contradict her. That night I didn't sleep in our bed. I slept in the guest room, staring at the ceiling, replaying every conversation from the past year. Lorraine insisting Andrew attend meetings alone. Bethany's sudden authority. The way Andrew had stopped sharing details about work. They hadn't just been excluding me socially. They had been preparing financially. 2 days later, I received a text from Bethany. "Mom says we should all talk. No lawyers, just family." I almost laughed. That sentence alone told me everything. People only say no lawyers when they know they need one. We met at Lorraine's house. The big one. The one with the gated drive and the dining table long enough to seat 12 people who all shared the same last name. Except me. I sat at the far end, hands folded, posture straight. Lorraine sat at the head-composed pearl necklace perfectly centered. "This has all gotten very dramatic," she began. "Over one dinner." "It's not about dinner," I said. She smiled thinly. "It never is with you." Andrew shifted uncomfortably beside me but said nothing. Lorraine continued. "We're restructuring some things, that's all. Temporary, internal." "Internal means without me," I said. "You married into this family," she replied. "You didn't build it." "And yet I contributed to it," I said, "financially and operationally." She waved a hand dismissively. "Supportive roles." Bethany smirked. I looked directly at Lorraine. "You altered a trust without disclosure." Her eyes sharpened. "Be careful." "No," I said. "You be careful. Because if you finalize those changes without correcting the oversight, you expose the entire trust to challenge." The room went still. Andrew finally spoke. "Claire, stop." Lorraine raised a hand. "No, let her finish." I stood. "I don't want to fight," I said. "I want acknowledgement. Restore the disclosure. Include me in the process, or I will involve counsel." Bethany laughed. "You wouldn't dare." I smiled. "I already have." That was a lie. But it was a good one. Lorraine studied me for a long moment. "You think you have leverage," she said. "I know I do," I replied. She leaned back in her chair. "Then let me be clear. If you pursue this, you will lose more than an invitation to Christmas." Andrew looked at her startled. "Mom, this is between her and me," Lorraine said calmly. I nodded. "Good. Then we understand each other." I walked out without waiting for permission. That night, Andrew tried to talk to me. I didn't stop him. I just listened. He said he was under pressure, that his mother was controlling, that things would settle down if I didn't push. I just want peace, he said. I looked at him. You want comfort, I said. Peace requires honesty. He didn't argue, which told me everything. Later alone, I made my first real call. Not to a divorce lawyer. Not yet. To a financial attorney who specialized in trust disputes. When she answered, I said one sentence. My husband's family thinks excluding me will make me disappear. She paused. Then she said it never does. I smiled for the first time in days, because now I wasn't reacting. I was planning. And they had no idea what I was about to uncover next. The attorney's name was Margaret Hale, and she didn't waste time pretending this was unusual. I see this pattern more often than you'd think, she said, her voice calm and seasoned. A family business, a controlling matriarch, a spouse who benefits from your silence. I sat in my car outside the grocery store, engine off, phone pressed to my ear. They're rewriting history, I said, like I was never there. They can try, Margaret replied, but paper remembers. She asked me to email everything I had. Trust documents, amendments, emails, notes. I sent them that night, organizing files until my eyes burned. She called me back the next afternoon. They made a mistake, she said, a big one. My stomach tightened. What kind? The kind people make when they underestimate someone, she said. Lorraine assumed your post-nuptial limited you. She forgot it also obligated her. I closed my eyes. Margaret continued. There's a disclosure clause tied to any restructuring that affects spousal interests. They altered distributions that impact Andrew's income stream. That affects you. So the omission wasn't just rude, I said. It was illegal. Potentially, she said. And at the very least, it's actionable. That night, Andrew came home late. He smelled like whiskey. Not drunk, just careless enough to forget I would notice. Mom's worried, he said, dropping his keys into the bowl by the door. She thinks you're escalating. I didn't look up from the couch. She escalated when she erased me, I said. He rubbed his temples. She's willing to compromise. Define compromise. She'll put your name back, he said, as a non-voting observer. I laughed. It surprised both of us. So I get to watch while decisions are made about my financial future, I said. How generous. She's trying to meet you halfway, he insisted. No, I said quietly. She's trying to put me back in my place. He flinched. That word landed. Why are you doing this, he asked. Why now? I finally looked at him. Because I finally see it, I said. And because you won't say no to her. He opened his mouth, closed it. The silence was my answer. 2 days later, Margaret filed a formal notice. Not a lawsuit. A request. For disclosure. It was polite, precise, impossible to ignore. Lorraine responded within hours. Not to Margaret. To me. She called while I was at work. I think we need to reset, she said. This has gone too far. I agree, I replied. Good, she said. Then withdraw the request. No. Her voice hardened. You're forcing my hand. I think I said evenly, you're finally showing it. She hung up. That night, Bethany showed up unannounced. She didn't knock. She never did. You're embarrassing us, she said the moment she stepped inside. Do you know what people are saying? I leaned against the counter. What people? She hesitated. Investors, she said. Friends. Interesting, I replied, because I haven't said anything publicly. She glared. You don't have to. Margaret Hale's name is enough. I smiled. That's not embarrassment, I said. That's fear. She stepped closer. You think you're clever, but Mom always wins. I tilted my head. Does she? Bethany laughed. You really believe you can take on this family? I already am, I said. She shook her head. You don't understand what you're risking. I understand exactly what I'm risking, I said. What I'm not willing to do anymore is risk myself. Her eyes narrowed. This is about the will, isn't it, she said. You think you're entitled. No, I said. I think you're hiding something. She went still. Just for a second. Enough. What did she change, I asked. Bethany recovered quickly. Nothing that concerns you. That's not an answer. She turned to leave. You'll regret this. I watched her go, heart-pounding, mind-racing. That night, after Andrew fell asleep, I opened his laptop. I hadn't planned to. I told myself I was just looking for a document he mentioned earlier. But when the screen lit up, an email preview caught my eye. From Lorraine. Subject: Final Allocation Draft. I clicked. The attachment opened slowly. And there it was. The truth they had been dancing around. The trust wasn't just being restructured. It was being redirected. Bethany would receive a controlling share of Whitaker Holdings. Andrew would receive a reduced income stream. Conditional. Based on marriage stability. And if we divorced, Andrew's share dropped again. Significantly. Lorraine had tied his inheritance to my silence. To my compliance. To my willingness to stay and stop asking questions. My hands trembled as I scrolled. At the bottom of the document was a note. Handwritten, scanned. If Claire continues to interfere, proceed with contingency plan. No details. Just that. Contingency plan. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure it would wake Andrew. They weren't just excluding me. They were positioning me as leverage, as a liability, as something to be managed. I didn't confront Andrew the next morning. I kissed him goodbye. I smiled. I went to work, and I forwarded the document to Margaret. Her reply came an hour later. This changes everything. I stared at my screen, pulse racing, because now this wasn't about inheritance. It was about manipulation, and I was done being handled. Margaret called me before I even finished my second cup of coffee. Her voice was sharper than before, focused, energized. They crossed a line, she said, and they did it in writing. I sat at my desk at work, the office humming around me, pretending to review spreadsheets while my life quietly shifted direction. What does that mean? I asked. It means, she said, this is no longer a defensive position. You're holding offensive leverage. I closed my eyes. For the first time since Christmas, I felt something other than dread. Control. Margaret explained it carefully. Lorraine's contingency plan, vague as it was, proved intent. It showed the restructuring wasn't neutral business housekeeping. It was conditional, strategic, designed to pressure Andrew through me. In trust law, Margaret said intent matters, and coercion matters even more. So what do? I asked. We let them keep talking, she replied, and we document everything. That became my new job. Not confrontation, observation. I stopped arguing with Andrew, stopped pushing back at dinner. I nodded when he talked about stress, about family obligations, about how his mother was just trying to protect everyone. I became agreeable. It unsettled him. He was used to resistance, used to wearing me down. My calm made him nervous. One night as we lay in bed, he turned to me. You've been quiet, he said. I'm tired, I replied. Of what? I shrugged. Fighting. He exhaled relief, softening his face. I knew you'd come around, he said. I almost laughed. Instead, I stared at the ceiling and counted breaths. 2 days later, Lorraine invited us to dinner. Not Christmas. A smaller thing. Controlled, strategic. I want us all on the same page, she said over the phone. No lawyers, just family. I agreed. Margaret approved. Go, she said. But record everything you can. Notes, dates, exact phrasing. I wore a simple dress. Neutral, non-threatening. The kind of outfit people underestimate. The dining room felt colder than usual. Bethany was already there, scrolling on her phone. Lorraine sat at the head of the table, posture perfect. Andrew squeezed my hand. I'm glad you came, Lorraine said. Me too, I replied. She studied me. You've been under a lot of stress. Yes, I said, but I'm managing. Her lips tightened. Dinner passed with forced normalcy. Talk of weather, work, a neighbor's renovation. No one mentioned the trust. Finally, Lorraine set down her fork. Let's be honest, she said. This family is at a crossroads. Bethany perked up. Some of us, Lorraine continued, are better suited to leadership than others. Andrew nodded slowly. I waited. Bethany has always shown initiative, Lorraine said. She understands the company. I agree, I said calmly. Both of them looked at me, startled. Lorraine smiled, cautious now. I'm glad you see that. I do, I said. I also see that Andrew has different strengths. Andrew frowned. What do you mean? I said, turning to him, you're not your mother. The air shifted. Lorraine's eyes narrowed. That's not an insult, I continued. It's an observation. You thrive when you're not being managed. Bethany scoffed. This isn't about feelings. No, I said. It's about control. Andrew stiffened. Claire. Lorraine raised a hand. Let her speak. I met her gaze. You're restructuring the trust to consolidate power. That's your right. But you're doing it by tying Andrew's financial security to my behavior. Andrew turned to her. Is that true? She didn't answer immediately. Andrew, she said carefully. Marriage is a variable. Businesses need stability. So you're punishing me if my wife asks questions, he snapped. Don't be dramatic, Bethany said. I watched Andrew's face change. Confusion, hurt, anger. This was new for him. Lorraine sighed. I'm protecting you. No, he said quietly. You're controlling me. The silence was thick. Lorraine leaned back. You're emotional. No, Andrew said. I'm finally paying attention. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. The rest of the evening unraveled quickly. Voices raised. Accusations implied but not spoken outright. When we left, Andrew was shaking. In the car, he gripped the steering wheel. She's been manipulating me, he said. Yes, I replied. For years. Yes, he swallowed. Why didn't you say something sooner? I looked out the window. I did, I said. You just weren't ready to hear it. At home, he paced the living room. She can't do this, he said. She can't use my marriage as leverage. She already did, I said. The question is what you're going to do about it. He stopped. What do you mean? I took a breath. I mean, you have a choice, I said. You can keep letting her decide who matters, or you can stand up. He looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time. I don't want to lose my family, he said. I nodded, neither did I. He didn't sleep that night. Neither did I. But for the first time, we were awake together. The next morning, Andrew called in sick. He spent the day on the phone, with accountants, with advisors, with people Lorraine had always filtered. By evening, his voice was hoarse. She lied to me, he said, about everything. Yes, I said. He sat beside me on the couch. I think she's planning something, he said quietly. I didn't tell him I already knew. I just reached for his hand. Because the next phase wasn't about exposing her. It was about letting her believe her plan was still working, and then turning it inside out. Once Andrew started questioning his mother, everything accelerated. That was the mistake Lorraine made. She assumed doubt would slow him down, make him cautious, make him cling to the familiar. Instead, it cracked something open. Andrew had grown up inside a system where obedience was rewarded and independence was quietly punished. The moment he saw that pattern clearly, he couldn't unsee it. And once a person stops unseeing control, it becomes harder to maintain. He started asking questions Lorraine wasn't prepared for. Why certain accounts were structured the way they were. Why Bethany's compensation had increased while his had stalled. Why key decisions were made in meetings he hadn't been told about. Lorraine responded the way she always did, with calm disappointment. I didn't raise you to be suspicious, she told him over the phone one evening. This doesn't suit you. Andrew told me about the call afterward, pacing the living room like a man trying to shed his own skin. She made it sound like I'd failed her, he said, like I was being disloyal. I watched him carefully. That was how she'd always kept power, by framing obedience as love and resistance as betrayal. She's counting on guilt, I said. That's her strongest tool. He nodded slowly. I see that now. But seeing didn't mean he was free yet. 2 days later, the next move came. Andrew was removed as a signer from one of the subsidiary accounts. No warning. No discussion. Just a notification from the bank. He stared at the email, stunned. She can't do that, he said. She just did, I replied. Margaret was less surprised. She's escalating, she said when we looped her in, which tells me she feels threatened. What does that mean for us? Andrew asked. It means Margaret said she's trying to force a decision. And she was. That weekend, Lorraine invited Andrew to lunch. Not me. Just him. He told me about it before he went sitting on the edge of the bed tying his shoes like a teenager heading to detention. She wants to talk alone, he said. Of course she does, I replied. He hesitated. Should I go? Yes, I said. He looked at me sharply. Yes, he repeated. Yes, I said again. Go. Listen. Don't argue, don't promise anything, just listen. Margaret agreed. Let her show her hand, she said. Andrew came home 3 hours later. His face was pale. She offered me a deal, he said. I waited. She'll restore my full share, he continued, if I sign a revised agreement. My stomach tightened, and if I agree to keep family matters private, he said. I nodded, meaning he said slowly, I agree not to pursue disclosure, and I agree to separation. The word hung in the air. Separation, I repeated. She said it didn't have to be permanent, he added quickly. Just until things settle. Until you comply, I said. He sank onto the couch. She framed it like she was saving me, he said. From stress, from conflict. And from me, I said. He didn't argue. That's when I realized, he said quietly, that she was willing to sacrifice my marriage to protect her control. I sat beside him. She already did, I said gently. The moment she made your income conditional on my silence. He buried his face in his hands. I don't know how to fight her, he said. I took a breath. You don't, I said. I do. He looked up. What do you mean? I mean, I said carefully, this doesn't end with a family conversation. It ends with accountability. He swallowed. She'll destroy us. She'll try, I said, but she's used to fighting in the dark. I reached for my phone and pulled up an email. I've been waiting to show you this, I said. He leaned closer. It was a message from Margaret sent that morning. We've identified a secondary issue, possible self-dealing. If confirmed, this exposes Lorraine personally. Andrew's eyes widened. What does that mean? He asked. It means, I said, she's been moving assets in ways that benefit her directly at the expense of the trust. He stared at the screen. That's illegal, he said. Yes, I replied. And Bethany, he asked. Complicit, I said. At best. He stood up and started pacing. This will blow everything up, he said. Yes, I agreed. He stopped. I don't want to lose you, he said quietly. I looked at him. For the first time in a long time, I said I believe you. He stepped closer. Then what do we do? I met his eyes. We stop letting her define the battlefield, I said. We stop reacting. And we make the truth unavoidable. He nodded slowly. That night we made a plan. Not emotional, not dramatic. Methodical. Margaret would request a forensic audit under the guise of routine compliance. Andrew would cooperate fully. I would remain invisible. Lorraine would believe her pressure was working. Bethany would grow careless. And somewhere in the numbers, the truth would surface. 2 days later, Lorraine called me for the first time in weeks. Her tone was almost warm. "I hear Andrew is reconsidering," she said. "He's thinking," I replied. "That's good," she said. "I've always liked you when you're reasonable." I smiled into the phone. "So have I said." She laughed softly. "Then perhaps Christmas can be pleasant after all." "Perhaps," I said. After we hung up, I sat in silence for a long moment. They thought they were negotiating. They didn't realize they were confessing. And the audit hadn't even started yet. The audit began quietly. That was Margaret's doing. She framed it as routine compliance, a standard internal review required by a lender Andrew had recently spoken to. Nothing alarming, nothing accusatory, just paperwork and patience. Lorraine agreed almost immediately. That should have been my first warning. People with nothing to hide usually complain. They delay, they argue about cost and inconvenience. Lorraine did none of that. She welcomed it. "I have nothing to fear," she told Andrew on the phone, her voice smooth. "Transparency protects everyone." Andrew repeated the words to me later, standing in the kitchen, hands shoved into his pockets. "She sounds confident," he said. "She always does," I replied. The auditors arrived the following week. 2 men and a woman, all neutral, all meticulous. They requested documents access explanations. Lorraine provided everything quickly, efficiently, with the practiced ease of someone who had been managing appearances for decades. Bethany, on the other hand, was irritated. She complained about the inconvenience, rolled her eyes, missed meetings, treated the auditors like interns. That was the crack. People who believe they are untouchable grow careless. I stayed out of sight. That was the hardest part. Every instinct in me wanted to confront, to expose, to demand answers. But Margaret was firm. "Silence is your strength right now," she told me. "Let them underestimate you." So I did. I focused on details instead. The way Lorraine started calling Andrew twice a day instead of once. The sudden warmth in her tone. The subtle praise. "I'm proud of how you're handling this," she told him one evening. "You're finally acting like a Whittaker." I watched Andrew stiffen when he repeated that to me. "She's trying to pull me back in," he said. "Yes," I replied, "because she thinks she's winning." The first sign that she wasn't came 10 days into the audit. Andrew received an email from the auditors requesting clarification on a series of intercompany transfers. Small amounts, frequent, routed through a shell entity Lorraine controlled directly. Andrew forwarded it to Margaret immediately. Her response came back an hour later. "This is significant." That night, Andrew didn't sleep. "She's been skimming," he said quietly, sitting at the edge of the bed. "Hasn't she?" I nodded. "That's what it looks like." "She accused me of being ungrateful," he said, "of using the family." I didn't say anything. "There were years I struggled," he continued. "Years I took less so Bethany could have more. Because Mom said it was temporary." His voice broke. "She was stealing from us," he said. "From the trust. From the company. From me." "Yes," I said. The next morning, Bethany called Andrew screaming. "Do you know what you've done?" she demanded. "Mom is furious." Andrew stayed calm. "Why?" "They're asking questions," she snapped. "About transfers that are none of their business." "If they're legitimate," he said evenly, "they shouldn't be a problem." She went quiet. Then she laughed, sharp and bitter. "You really think this ends well for you," she said. "You're not the favorite. You never were." Andrew hung up without responding. He sat at the table afterwards, staring at nothing. "I spent my whole life trying to earn her approval," he said, "and it was never enough." I reached for his hand. "That's because approval was the leash," I said, "not the reward." 2 days later, Lorraine requested a meeting. Urgent. Private. Andrew asked Margaret what to do. "Go," she said, "but don't go alone." So we went together. Lorraine greeted us with tight smiles and too much hospitality. Tea already poured. Chairs arranged carefully. Bethany sat beside her, arms crossed. "I won't pretend I'm not disappointed," Lorraine began. "This audit has created unnecessary tension." Andrew didn't respond. Lorraine turned to me. "You've always been very observant," she said, "perhaps too much so." I met her gaze, perhaps. Bethany scoffed. "You've turned him against us." "No," I said. "You did that yourselves." Lorraine's eyes hardened. "This family doesn't air its business," she said. "We handle things internally." "You handled them internally for years," I said. "That's the problem." She leaned forward. "If you continue down this path, there will be consequences." Andrew spoke before I could. "For who?" he asked. Lorraine blinked. "For everyone," she said, "including you." He shook his head slowly. "No," he said, "just you." The silence that followed was heavy. Bethany stood abruptly. This is ridiculous. You're choosing her over your own blood. Andrew stood too. I'm choosing myself, he said. We left without another word. That evening, Margaret called. They found more, she said. Much more. She explained that Lorraine had been funneling trust funds into personal accounts for years, covering it with complex transfers and vague justifications. Bethany had signed off on several. If this goes public, Andrew said, voice tight, she could lose everything. Yes, Margaret replied, and face criminal exposure. Andrew closed his eyes. She did this to herself, I said quietly. Margaret agreed. The question now, she said, is how far you want to take it. Andrew looked at me. I held his gaze. Far enough that it can't happen again, I said. That night, Lorraine sent me a message. Not a call. A message. We can still fix this. Think about what you're doing to this family. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I typed back. I am thinking about it. And I pressed send. Because she was right about one thing. This was about family. Just not the kind she believed in anymore. The first leak didn't come from us. That was the part no one expected. It started with a call Andrew received while he was at work, a number he didn't recognize. He stepped into a conference room to answer it, expecting a vendor or a client. Instead, it was one of Lorraine's oldest partners, a man who had known her since before the company had a name. I'm hearing things, the man said without greeting. And I don't like surprises. Andrew went very still. What kind of things, he asked. About transfers, the man replied. About money moving where it shouldn't. Andrew didn't deny it. He didn't confirm it either. He said one sentence Margaret had coached him to say. There's an internal review underway. You'll be informed appropriately. The line went quiet. Then the man sighed. I warned her this would happen one day, he said. Power makes people sloppy. He hung up. Andrew came home shaken. They're talking, he said. Outside the family. I nodded. Once that starts, it doesn't stop. By the end of the week, 3 more calls came in, all variations of the same thing. Concern, confusion, distance. The family business had survived decades because Lorraine controlled the story. She decided who knew what and when. Now the story was slipping out of her hands piece by piece, and she didn't know where the cracks were. That terrified her. Her next move was predictable. She tried to isolate Andrew. She called him constantly, left long voicemails about loyalty and legacy, about how families fall apart when outsiders interfere. Outsiders. That word again. She's rewriting history, Andrew said one night, scrolling through his phone. Now she's saying you manipulated me, that you planted ideas. I sat across from him at the kitchen table. And do you believe her, I asked. He didn't hesitate. No. That was new. That was everything. The auditors requested a second phase. More documents, older records, deeper access. Lorraine pushed back this time. She complained about cost, about harassment, about the damage to the family's reputation. Margaret responded calmly, professionally, with citations Lorraine couldn't argue. The review continued. Bethany cracked first. She showed up at our house late one evening, eyes wild, voice sharp. You need to stop this, she said, pacing the living room. Mom is barely sleeping. I watched her carefully. This wasn't anger. This was panic. She made choices, I said. So did you. Bethany stopped pacing. You think you're so righteous, she snapped. You came into this family and decided you deserved a seat at the table. I earned my seat, I said. You inherited yours. Her face flushed. You're going to ruin everything, she said. No, I replied. I'm revealing it. She laughed, brittle. You think Andrew will choose you when it comes down to it? Andrew stepped into the room. He already did, he said. Bethany stared at him like she'd never seen him before. You're throwing away your birthright, she said. No, he replied. I'm refusing to be owned by it. She left without another word. That night, Andrew admitted something he'd never said out loud. When we were kids, he said, sitting beside me in the dark, Mom used to rank us. I turned toward him. Not openly, he continued. But we knew. Who pleased her? Who disappointed her? Bethany learned early how to perform. I learned how to disappear. I squeezed his hand. She trained you, I said. Both of you. Just differently. He nodded. And now she's losing control, he said. That's why she's scared. The next morning, the auditors flagged a transaction large enough that they were required to escalate. It triggered mandatory reporting. Margaret called me immediately. This is the point of no return, she said. Once regulators are involved, Lorraine can't contain it. I felt my chest tighten. Are we ready? I asked. Yes, she said. Are you? I thought about Christmas, about being uninvited from my own life, about the quiet way they had tried to erase me. Yes, I said. Lorraine found out that afternoon. She didn't call. She showed up. She stood on our porch, perfectly composed, like a woman arriving for a charity luncheon instead of a confrontation. "I need to speak with you," she said. I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. Andrew watched from the window. Lorraine looked past me as if assessing the house, the life inside it. "You've made yourself very dangerous," she said calmly. I met her gaze. "So have you," I replied. "This could have been handled quietly," she said. "You forced exposure." "No," I said, "your greed did." She studied me, eyes cold. "You think this ends with me?" she asked. "There will be consequences." I smiled. "There already are," I said. She leaned closer. "If Andrew loses everything," she said softly, "that will be on you." I didn't flinch. "If Andrew loses anything," I said, "it will be because you tried to control him instead of trusting him." Her mouth tightened. For the first time I saw it. Fear. Real fear. She turned and walked away without another word. That night the news broke quietly. Not headlines, just whispers. Regulators, investigations, questions no one could answer yet. The Whitaker name, once untouchable, had entered a new phase. Uncertainty. Andrew sat beside me on the couch, exhausted but steady. "I don't know what comes next," he said. I rested my head on his shoulder. "Neither do I said. "But whatever it is, it won't be decided without us." Outside, the world kept turning. Inside, something old and rotten was finally collapsing. And the most dangerous part of any collapse is not the fall. It's what people do when they realize they're about to hit the ground. The day the regulators made it official, Andrew didn't go to work. Neither did I. We sat at the kitchen table with our phones face down between us, like two people waiting for a verdict neither of us wanted but both of us knew was necessary. At 9:17 in the morning, Margaret called. "They've opened a formal investigation," she said. "Financial misconduct, breach of fiduciary duty, potential fraud." Andrew closed his eyes. "And my mother?" he asked. "She's been advised to retain separate counsel," Margaret replied. "So has Bethany." Separate. That word mattered. It meant the family was no longer a single unit. It meant the cracks had split wide enough that self-preservation was taking over. "What about the company?" Andrew asked. "There will be oversight," Margaret said. "Possibly a temporary receiver. You'll be contacted." When the call ended, the house felt strangely quiet. Not tense, empty. Andrew stared at the wall for a long time. "I thought I'd feel relieved," he said, "but I just feel hollow." "That's normal," I replied. "You're grieving something that was never what you thought it was." He nodded. The first email arrived an hour later. A request for documents Andrew had already provided. Then another. And another. By noon, it was clear this wasn't staying contained. Someone had talked. By 3 in the afternoon, a business reporter called Andrew's cell. He let it go to voicemail. We listened to the message together. The reporter was polite, neutral, curious, which was worse than hostile. "They know," Andrew said quietly. "Yes," I replied. "And they're only going to know more." Lorraine called that evening. Andrew didn't answer. She left a message. It was different this time. No guilt. No authority. Just urgency. "Andrew," she said, her voice tight, "you need to come see me. Now, we need to align our stories." Align our stories. I looked at Andrew. "That's your answer," I said. He deleted the message. The next day, Bethany tried a different approach. She texted me. "We need to talk, woman to woman." I stared at the screen. Then I replied, "No." Her response came immediately. "You think you've won. You haven't even seen what Mom is willing to do." I didn't respond, because I was finally starting to understand something fundamental. This wasn't about winning. It was about ending a pattern. The investigators requested interviews. Andrew went first. He came home afterward, drained, shoulders slumped, voice hoarse. "They asked about everything," he said. "When I knew, what I signed, what Mom told me." "What did you say?" I asked. "The truth," he replied. For once. That night I dreamed of Christmas. The table, the lights, empty chairs. But this time I wasn't standing outside the door. I was walking away from the house entirely. The next week brought a twist none of us had anticipated. Lorraine's attorney contacted Margaret. Not to fight, to negotiate. "She's offering restitution," Margaret told us, quietly, "in exchange for cooperation and discretion." Andrew laughed bitter. "She thinks she can buy silence." "She's trying to limit exposure," Margaret said. "It's a common tactic." "What happens if we refuse?" I asked. Margaret didn't hesitate. "Then this goes where it's going anyway," she said, "only without her narrative control." Andrew looked at me. This was his decision. He took a breath. "No deal," he said. Margaret nodded. "Understood." That decision changed everything. Because once Lorraine realized money wouldn't save her, she shifted tactics again. She turned on Bethany. Publicly. She claimed Bethany had handled day-to-day transfers. That any irregularities were misunderstandings created by her daughter's inexperience. Bethany responded the only way she knew how. She panicked. She called Andrew crying. "She's blaming me," she sobbed. "She's trying to make me the fall guy." Andrew listened silently. Help me, Bethany pleaded. Please, she'll destroy me. Andrew closed his eyes. Tell the truth, he said. She hung up on him. 2 days later, Bethany retained her own attorney. 3 days after that, her attorney contacted Margaret. Bethany was prepared to cooperate. Fully. Andrew sat back in his chair when Margaret told us. It's happening, he said. They're turning on each other. Yes, Margaret replied. That's what happens when control fails. I felt something unexpected then. Not satisfaction, not triumph, sadness. This was a family eating itself alive because it had been built on hierarchy instead of trust. The formal charges came quietly. No arrests, no spectacle, just filings. Lorraine was removed from her role pending investigation. Bethany was placed on leave. The company's board released a neutral statement about governance reforms and cooperation. Andrew read it twice. They're pretending this is procedural, he said. They always do, I replied, until they can't anymore. That night, Andrew asked me something that surprised me. If I had chosen differently, he said earlier, would any of this have happened? I thought carefully before answering. This didn't start with you, I said, and it doesn't end with you, but you decided not to pass it on. He nodded slowly. That was when I realized the revenge wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was structural. We hadn't screamed. We hadn't threatened. We had simply refused to be controlled, and that refusal had unraveled everything. The next chapter would bring consequences, public ones, personal ones, and a final test of where Andrew's loyalty truly lay, because exposure is only the beginning. What matters is who you become after the truth is no longer hidden. The first headline broke on a Tuesday morning. Not on the front page, not with sirens or scandalous language, just a clean, measured sentence buried in the business section. Whitaker Holdings under regulatory review amid governance concerns. Andrew read it 3 times at the kitchen counter while the coffee went cold. That's it, he asked. For now, I said. He let out a breath he'd been holding for weeks. They made it sound so small. That's intentional, I replied. This phase is about credibility, not drama. By noon, his phone wouldn't stop vibrating. Former colleagues, board members, people who had once spoken only through Lorraine now suddenly eager to sound neutral. One call stood out. A board member Andrew had respected for years didn't bother with pleasantries. You did the right thing, the man said, but you need to be prepared. This is going to get ugly. Andrew swallowed. How ugly? Families don't give up power quietly. He was right. That afternoon, Lorraine made her move. Not through lawyers, through blood. She called Andrew's father. A man who had stayed out of everything for years, choosing absence over conflict, choosing silence over responsibility. Andrew hadn't spoken to him in months. The call came while Andrew was in the shower. I saw the name on the screen and felt my stomach drop. When Andrew came out, towel around his waist, I handed him the phone. He called, I said. Andrew froze. What did he want? He asked. I didn't answer. He nodded slowly. I'll call him back. He stepped outside onto the porch. I watched through the window as he paced shoulders tight, one hand pressed to his forehead. The call lasted 20 minutes. When he came back inside, his face was gray. She's framing it as betrayal, he said quietly. Says I've destroyed the family legacy. I said nothing. She told him you manipulated me, he continued. That I was confused. That I didn't understand the consequences. And what did he say? I asked. Andrew sat down heavily. He asked me why I couldn't just let it go, he said. For the sake of peace. There it was again. Peace. That word that always meant surrender. What did you say? I asked. Andrew looked up at me. I said peace that requires silence isn't peace, he said. It's control. My chest tightened. He didn't argue, Andrew added. He just went quiet. The next day, the second headline dropped. Former executive cooperates with investigators in Whitaker probe. Bethany. Andrew stared at the article on his phone, disbelief etched across his face. She turned, he said. Yes, I replied, to save herself. The article was vague, but the implication was clear. Someone was talking. And once one person talks, everyone else starts calculating. That evening, Margaret called with an update. Bethany's cooperation confirms what we suspected, she said. The self-dealing wasn't isolated. It was systematic. And Lorraine, Andrew asked. Margaret paused. She's denying everything. Blaming Bethany, claiming ignorance. Andrew laughed hollow. Of course she is. She's also attempting to position herself as mentally overwhelmed, Margaret added. Stress, health concerns, age. I felt anger rise. She's not fragile, I said. She's strategic. Yes, Margaret replied. And the investigators know that. The tension finally broke 3 days later. A subpoena arrived at our house. Not for Andrew. For me? I stared at the envelope for a long moment before opening it. What is it? Andrew asked. They want me to testify, I said. His face drained of color. They're calling me as a witness, I continued, regarding the trust amendments, the pressure, the omission. Andrew sat down slowly. They're going to make this public, he said. Yes, I replied, they already are. That night we didn't sleep. Andrew kept replaying conversations from his childhood, moments that suddenly made sense, warnings he hadn't recognized as warnings. I thought she was strict, he said quietly. I didn't realize she was calculating. Children don't see manipulation, I said. They normalize it. The testimony was scheduled for the following week. Margaret prepared me carefully. Stick to facts, she said. Dates, words, actions, not emotions. I can do that, I replied. She looked at me closely. You're calm. I'm clear, I said. That distinction mattered. The day of the testimony, Andrew drove me downtown. The building was cold, institutional, designed to make people feel small. I didn't. Inside the room, men and women in suits shuffled papers and avoided eye contact. Lorraine wasn't there. That didn't surprise me. She preferred distance. They asked me about the exclusion from Christmas, about the trust amendments, about the contingency plan. I answered plainly. When they asked if I felt pressured to remain silent, I didn't hesitate. Yes, I said, explicitly. When they asked who applied that pressure, I met their eyes. My mother-in-law, I said, with my husband as leverage. The room went still. Afterward, Andrew hugged me in the hallway. You were incredible, he said. I was honest, I replied. The final headline came 2 days later. Longer, sharper, impossible to ignore. Whitaker family matriarch faces charges amid expanding financial probe. Andrew read it once. Then he closed his phone and set it face down. It's over, he said. For her, I replied, yes. He leaned back against the couch and stared at the ceiling. I don't feel victorious, he admitted. I don't either, I said. Victory implies competition. This wasn't that. This was consequence. That night, Andrew turned to me with red-rimmed eyes. I'm choosing you, he said, no matter what happens next. I took his hand. I know, I said. That's why we're still here. Outside, the world buzzed with speculation and judgment. Inside, something else was happening. A family built on control was finally being dismantled. And what comes after dismantling is always the hardest part. Because when the power is gone, all that's left is the truth. And not everyone survives that. After the charges were announced, the noise got louder. Not from Lorraine, from everyone else. Friends we hadn't heard from in years suddenly wanted to check in. Distant relatives sent carefully worded messages about hope and healing. Former colleagues reached out to Andrew with thinly veiled curiosity, pretending concern while fishing for details. I watched it all with a strange detachment. When a family collapses publicly, people don't rush in to help. They circle. They assess. They decide where to stand once the dust settles. Andrew took a leave of absence from work. Not because he was asked to, but because he needed space to breathe without the weight of other people's expectations. The board installed an interim leadership team. Neutral outsiders, no loyalty to Lorraine, no patience for legacy arguments. Andrew wasn't punished. He was sidelined, and for the first time in his life, that felt like freedom. I don't know who I am without the company, he admitted one afternoon as we walked through the park near our house. Everything I did was tied to proving I belonged. You belong here, I said. Everything else is optional. He nodded, but I could tell it would take time. Identity doesn't dissolve just because the truth comes out. It has to be rebuilt. The criminal case moved slowly, as those things always do. Motions, delays, statements that said a lot without saying anything. Lorraine was released on bail. She never contacted us again. Not once. That silence spoke louder than any apology ever could. Bethany, on the other hand, tried one last time. She emailed me late one night. Not Andrew. Me. The subject line was simple. We need to talk. I stared at the screen for a long time before opening it. Her message was long. Rambling. Defensive. She apologized without apologizing. Took responsibility while shifting blame. Claimed she had been manipulated. That she never understood the full scope of what her mother was doing. At the end, she wrote one sentence that told me everything. I hope you can forgive me so we can be a family again. I didn't reply. Forgiveness isn't a prerequisite for distance. Sometimes distance is the healthiest boundary there is. Andrew supported my decision without question. She wants absolution, he said, not accountability. Exactly. As summer approached, something unexpected happened. I started to feel lighter. Not because everything was resolved, but because I was no longer carrying their version of the story. I didn't have to explain myself. I didn't have to justify my presence. I didn't have to make myself smaller to keep the peace. That kind of relief doesn't announce itself. It settles quietly. One evening as we sat on the porch watching the sky turn orange, Andrew turned to me. Do you regret it? He asked. What? Not backing down, he said. pushing this all the way. I thought carefully. No, I said. I regret how long it took me to trust myself. He nodded slowly. I keep thinking about Christmas, he said. About how small that moment seemed at the time. It wasn't small, I replied. It was the tell. He smiled faintly. She really thought excluding you would make this go away. She thought I'd disappear, I said. And instead he said you dismantled her. I shook my head. She dismantled herself, I said. I just stopped protecting her from the consequences. That distinction mattered. The trial date was set for early fall. Andrew would testify. So would Bethany. I would not. My part was already done. That night I had a dream. I was standing at a long dining table, the kind Lorraine used to host holidays around. The chairs were filled, but no one spoke. One by one, people stood up and walked away, leaving the table empty. Lorraine was the last to go. She didn't look angry. She looked confused. I woke up calm. That surprised me. As the leaves began to turn, Andrew received an offer. Not from Whitaker Holdings, from a smaller firm. A competitor Lorraine had once dismissed as irrelevant. They wanted Andrew for his expertise, not his name. He hesitated. I don't know if I'm ready, he said. You are, I replied. You just haven't been wanted for the right reasons before. He accepted. On his first day, he came home smiling. They asked what I thought, he said, almost amazed. They listened. I smiled back. That's what respect feels like, I said. The night before Lorraine's trial began, Andrew couldn't sleep. He lay beside me, staring at the ceiling. She taught me so many things, he said quietly. Discipline, ambition, control. And what did she never teach you, I asked. He thought for a moment. How to be kind without expecting something in return, he said. I reached for his hand. You're learning now, I said. Outside the house was quiet. Inside something solid was forming. Not vengeance, not triumph. A sense of self that didn't depend on approval. The next chapter would be the last confrontation. Not in a courtroom, but in the quiet aftermath where people are forced to live with what they've done, and where the real measure of revenge finally becomes clear. The courthouse smelled like old paper and polished wood. I noticed it the moment I walked in, as if my senses had sharpened for this day alone. The benches were hard, the air too cold. Every sound echoed a second longer than it should have. This was the place where truth was supposed to matter. Andrew sat beside me, his shoulders squared, his jaw tight. He wore a simple navy suit. No family crest, no inherited power stitched into the seams. Just himself. Lorraine sat across the room with her attorneys. She looked smaller than I remembered. Not fragile, just reduced, as if the space around her had finally stopped bending to accommodate her presence. When our eyes met, she didn't glare. She didn't smirk. She looked past me like I was furniture. That used to hurt. Today it didn't. The opening statements were clinical. Dates, documents, financial trails laid out like a map that led back to her every time. The prosecutor didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The facts did the damage. When Andrew was called to the stand, my heart thudded once hard and then steadied. He told the truth. Not theatrically, not emotionally. Just clearly. He spoke about the pressure, the expectation, the way dissent was punished quietly through exclusion and humiliation instead of raised voices. He spoke about the trust he placed in his mother, about how he assumed she was protecting the company when she was protecting herself. He admitted his own blindness. That mattered. When the defense tried to frame him as complicit, he didn't flinch. I trusted her, he said evenly. That was my mistake, not my crime. Lorraine watched him without expression. Bethany testified next. She cried, real tears this time. She talked about loyalty, about fear, about how hard it was to stand up to a woman who had controlled every aspect of her life. I believed her fear. I didn't excuse her choices. Both things can be true. When the judge adjourned for the day, Andrew looked exhausted. You did well, I said as we stepped outside. I didn't do it for her, he replied. I did it so I could live with myself. That night we didn't talk much. There are days that drain words from you completely. Instead, we sat together on the couch, the television off the room lit only by a lamp in the corner. The quiet felt earned. The verdict came 2 days later. Guilty, on all counts. There was no gasp, no dramatic reaction, just a collective exhale from the room. Lorraine closed her eyes for a brief moment. Not in grief, in calculation. She was already thinking about appeals. Sentencing would come later, but the power was gone. That was irreversible. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Andrew declined to comment. So did I. We didn't owe anyone a soundbite. Back home, something unexpected happened. Nothing. No celebratory champagne, no sense of triumph. Just stillness. I realized then that revenge, when it's done right, doesn't feel explosive. It feels quiet. Final. The weeks that followed were strangely ordinary. Andrew settled into his new role. He came home tired but satisfied, the kind of tired that comes from work that means something. I returned to my own routines, rediscovering parts of myself that had been dormant for years. I started painting again. Small canvases at first, abstract shapes, colors I couldn't name but needed to put somewhere. One afternoon, a letter arrived. No return address. The handwriting was unmistakable. Lorraine. I held it for a long time before opening it. Inside was a single page. No apology. No admission. Just a statement. I never meant for you to be collateral damage. You were simply inconvenient. I laughed. Not out loud, inside. Because there it was. The closest thing to truth she would ever offer. I folded the letter and placed it in the fire pit out back. Andrew stood beside me as I lit the match. The paper curled, blackened, turned to ash. You okay? He asked. I am now, I said. Bethany sent one final message a month later. She was moving out of state, starting over. She didn't ask to meet. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She just said she hoped Andrew would be happy. That was enough. By fall, the leaves outside our windows turned gold and red. The air sharpened. The world felt like it was preparing for something new. One evening, Andrew came home with a bottle of wine. What's the occasion? I asked. He smiled. Nothing, he said, and that feels like everything. We sat at the table, just the two of us. No hierarchy, no performance, no one keeping score. I used to think power was about control, he said. About making people fall in line. And now I asked. Now I think it's about choice, he said. About knowing you could dominate a room and choosing not to. I raised my glass. To choice, I said. He clinked his against mine. To the future we get to build, he replied. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought about the woman I had been when this all started. The one who questioned her instincts. The one who accepted exclusion to keep the peace. The one who thought dignity was something granted by others. I barely recognized her now. Not because I was hardened, but because I was clear. Clarity changes everything. The final chapter wasn't going to be about them. It was going to be about us. About what remains after the reckoning. About what grows in the space where fear used to live. And about how the truest revenge isn't destruction. It's freedom. People think the end of a revenge story is the verdict. It isn't. The verdict is just the noise stopping. The real ending happens later in the quiet moments no one applauds. 6 months after the trial, winter settled in gently. No storms, no drama, just cold mornings and soft light through bare trees. Andrew and I moved. Not far, just far enough. A smaller house near the edge of town with a porch that caught the afternoon sun. And a kitchen window that looked out over a line of old oak trees. No gates, no long driveway, no history embedded in the walls. We chose it together. That mattered. The first night there, surrounded by boxes and mismatched furniture, Andrew stood in the living room and laughed. I keep waiting for someone to tell us we did it wrong, he said. No one's coming, I replied. He let that sink in. For years, his life had been a series of approvals and rejections handed down like verdicts. Even joy felt conditional, earned, revocable. This wasn't. This was ours. Lorraine was sentenced in late winter. The judge didn't mince words. Abuse of power, breach of trust, calculated manipulation, long-term financial harm, years in prison, no leniency. She listened without reaction, hands folded, spine straight. Even then, she held herself like someone who expected the world to correct its mistake eventually. She never looked at Andrew. Not once. That was her final punishment. Not prison. Irrelevance. Andrew didn't attend the sentencing. He was at work that day, leading his first major project, sitting at a table where no one knew his last name meant anything at all. He texted me during lunch. I'm not angry anymore. That was all. Bethany sent a postcard from Arizona. A desert sunset, a short note. I'm learning who I am without her voice in my head. I hope you are too. I wished her well. From a distance. Some bridges don't need rebuilding. They just need to be left behind. As for me, something unexpected happened. I stopped replaying conversations, stopped rehearsing arguments in the shower, stopped imagining what I would say if Lorraine ever apologized. I didn't need the closure. I had already walked through it. One evening I hosted dinner. Just a few friends, people who had known us before everything exploded and stayed anyway. The table was crowded, the food imperfect, the laughter real. Halfway through the night, I caught Andrew watching me with a look I hadn't seen before. What I asked. You're different, he said. Not guarded, not braced. I'm not waiting for the ground to shift anymore, I said. He nodded slowly. Neither was he. Later that night, after everyone left and the dishes were stacked in the sink, Andrew leaned against the counter and said, I used to think revenge meant winning. And now I asked. Now I think it means not needing to win anymore, he said. That was the moment I understood something important. We hadn't destroyed Lorraine. We had outgrown her. The company survived without her name attached. The family adapted without her control. And we flourished without her shadow. That was the real reversal of power. Spring arrived early. The trees bloomed in pale green. The air softened. Life moved forward without asking permission. One afternoon, I received an email from a woman I didn't recognize. She had worked under Lorraine years ago. She wrote to say thank you, not for exposing the fraud, but for proving something she had always suspected, that the cruelty wasn't her fault. I read the message twice. Then I closed my laptop and sat quietly for a long time. Revenge stories are often sold as sharp and satisfying, but the best ones don't end with applause. They end with healing rippling outward in ways you never see coming. On our anniversary, Andrew surprised me. No grand gesture, just a note on the kitchen table. It read, "Thank you for staying when walking away would have been easier. Thank you for choosing truth over comfort. Thank you for being my family when mine failed." I folded the note and placed it in a drawer with a few other things I wanted to keep forever. That night we sat on the porch wrapped in blankets watching the stars come out one by one. The world felt wide again. Not threatening, inviting. "If you could tell your past self one thing," Andrew said quietly, "what would it be?" I didn't answer right away. Then I said, "You're not imagining it, and you're not wrong for wanting more." He squeezed my hand. "That would have helped," he said. "It helps now," I replied. Because stories like this aren't just entertainment. They're reminders. That exclusion is often the first weapon. That silence is rarely neutral. That manipulation thrives when good people doubt themselves. And that revenge doesn't always look like fire and ruin. Sometimes it looks like a woman standing her ground. A man choosing integrity over inheritance. A family rebuilt from honesty instead of obligation. If you're listening to this and something in your life feels off, pay attention to that feeling. It's not paranoia. It's information. And if you're standing at a table where your place is constantly questioned, know this. Walking away is not weakness. Telling the truth is not cruelty. And reclaiming your dignity is not revenge. It's survival. If this story resonated with you, take a moment to like it, to share it, to leave a comment. Tell me about a time you chose yourself, or a moment you stopped protecting someone who didn't protect you. And if you want to hear more stories about betrayal, justice, and the quiet power of self-respect, subscribe. These stories matter, because someone out there needs to hear that they're not alone. This was my story, and maybe in some way it's yours too.